The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as 200 cadets from across the galaxy filled the metal seats, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago when the Galactic Coalition had first formed. Now it was normal to see insectoid Zentarii sitting beside massive Ravok herbivores, aquatic Pelthians in their water-filled mobility suits next to the graceful Savari with their 4 arms and crystalline eyes. Commander Salen stood at the front of the room. Her Pelthian features set in what her species considered a serious expression, though the slight blue tint to her gill slits suggested she was more anxious than she wanted to appear. She tapped a console, and a holographic planet materialized above the assembly, spinning slowly to reveal continents covered in dense green vegetation, vast oceans, and swirling white storm systems. "Cadets," Commander Salem began, her voice carrying the slight gurgling undertone common to her species. "This is Cora 7. You're home for the next 7 days." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room, followed by worried chittering, low rumbles, and the sound of water sloshing in mobility suits as cadets shifted uncomfortably. "Cora 7 is classified as a Class 3 death world," the commander continued, pulling up data streams that made several cadets pale or darken or shift colors, depending on their species' fear response. "The gravity is 1 to 2 times standard. The atmosphere contains higher oxygen levels than most of you are accustomed to, and the native fauna includes 17 species of apex predators." Vexler, a young Zentarii cadet with gleaming black chitin and compound eyes that reflected the hologram's green light, felt his mandibles click together in distress. His homeworld was a gentle place of low gravity and calm weather where the most dangerous creature was barely the size of his smallest leg segment. The vegetation includes 43 varieties of toxic plants, Commander Salen went on, seemingly oblivious to the growing panic in the room. Temperatures range from freezing at night to what most species would consider uncomfortably hot during the day, and the weather patterns are highly unpredictable, with severe storms occurring every 2 to 3 days. Beside Vexler, Kira soon made a sound like water being forced through a narrow pipe, her species equivalent of a whimper. She had grown up in the calm, temperature-controlled oceans of Pelthia Prime, where weather was managed by orbital stations and predators had been eliminated centuries ago. "You will each be dropped in different zones," the commander said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You communicators will be disabled, except for emergency extraction requests. You have been provided with basic survival packs containing a knife, water purification tablets, thermal blanket, and first aid supplies." The room erupted in protests, questions shouted in a dozen languages. But Commander Salen raised one webbed hand for silence. "This is a standard exercise," she said firmly. "Every cadet must pass survival training to graduate from the academy. Those who cannot handle 1 week on a Class 3 world are not ready for the challenges of serving in the Coalition military." Vexler noticed movement to his right and turned his compound eyes to observe the human cadet sitting 3 rows back. The human looked utterly relaxed, even bored, leaning back in his seat with his arms crossed, one leg bouncing slightly in what Vexler had learned was a human gesture of mild impatience rather than fear. The human's name was Jake Morrison, according to the roster, and Vexler had been fascinated by him since orientation. Humans were relatively new to the Coalition, having only made contact 15 years ago, and their species was still something of a mystery to the older races. Jake Morrison certainly didn't look like he belonged in a military academy. He had the casual bearing of someone waiting for a transport to a vacation destination, his brown hair slightly messy, his uniform somehow managing to look rumpled, even though Vexlar knew for a fact they had all been issued the same crisp regulation attire just that morning. "Questions?" Commander Salen asked. though her tone suggested she didn't really want Anya, brave Savari cadet, raise two of her forearms. "Commander, what is the survival rate for this exercise?" "All cadets who follow proper protocol survive," the commander replied, which Vexler noticed was not quite the same as answering the actual question. "Emergency extraction is available at any time by activating your distress beacon, though using it does mean failing this portion of your training." Jake Morrison yawned at Vexler found this deeply unsettling. Every instinct his species had developed over millions of years of evolution was screaming that a Class 3 death world represented mortal danger. Yet this human looked like he was fighting to stay awake during what was clearly the most important briefing of their young military careers. "Prepare for deployment," Commander Salen announced. "Drop pods launch in 1 hour. Dismissed." The cadets filed out of the briefing room in a state of barely controlled panic, clustering in species groups to share fears and strategies. Vexlar found himself gravitating toward Kirasun and Torgan, a massive Ravak whose tree-trunk legs trembled slightly despite his species' renowned strength. "I don't know if I can do this," Kirasun whispered, her voice bubbling through her suit speakers. "My people haven't dealt with true wilderness in 3,000 years." Torgan rumbled his agreement. "My kind are strong but slow. If a predator comes, we'll be fine," Vexler interrupted, trying to sound confident even though his own survival instincts were screaming. "We follow the protocols. Stay calm. Wait for extraction if necessary." "Is no one going to talk about the human?" Kirasun asked, glancing back toward where Jake Morrison was walking alone toward the pod bay, hands in his pockets like he was strolling through a park. "He doesn't seem worried at all. Humans are strange," Torgan said, which was something of an understatement in Vexler's opinion. Perhaps he doesn't understand the danger, but Vexler wasn't so sure. He had studied Earth briefly in xenobiology class, and what he remembered made his chitin itch with discomfort. The drop pods were exactly as intimidating as Vexler had imagined. Small metal spheres barely large enough to contain a single occupant, with basic life support and crash cushioning that was supposed to protect them during the violent descent through Cora 7's atmosphere. The word "supposed" did not fill him with confidence. Jake Morrison climbed into his pod without hesitation, securing the harness with practiced ease and giving a thumbs up to the launch technician, a gesture Vexler had learned meant approval or readiness in human culture. Vexler scrambled into his own pod, his 6 legs struggling to find purchase on the smooth metal interior designed for bipedal species. He finally managed to secure himself and initiated the pod systems, watching the countdown timer begin its inexorable march toward 0. Through the small viewport, he could see other pods being sealed, containing cadets from every corner of the coalition, all of them about to face the same terrifying test. The launch was violent. Vexler's pod shook and rattled as magnetic accelerators flung it away from the orbital station, and his last coherent thought, before the crushing G-forces made thinking impossible, was a desperate hope that the human's calm was based on knowledge rather than ignorance. Because if Jake Morrison knew something the rest of them didn't, Vexler very much wanted to learn what it was. The impact jarred every segment of Vexler's exoskeleton as his pod slammed into Cora 7's surface, bouncing twice before the stabilizers deployed and brought the wild tumbling to a halt. He lay there for several moments, trying to remember how to breathe, before the pod's hatch blew open with a hiss of escaping pressure. Humid air rushed in, thick and heavy with moisture that immediately began condensing on his chitin. Vexler stumbled out of the pod on shaky legs and immediately regretted it as the full weight of the planet's gravity pressed down on him like an invisible hand. His homeworld's gravity was barely half of standard coalition measure, and Cora 7's 1 to 2 times standard felt like trying to move with weights attached to every limb. He took a step and nearly fell, catching himself against the pod's warm metal surface. The jungle around him was alive with sound. Clicks and buzzes and calls that made his translator input flash. Error messages as it struggled to determine if any of the noises were language. The vegetation was a riot of green and shades his compound eyes had never encountered. And the air smelled of decay and growth and things he couldn't identify. Vetchler activated his survival pack and pulled out the basic supplies, his mandibles clicking nervously as he tried to remember the protocols from training. Water first, then shelter. Then assess the situation for threats. A sound like thunder rumbled overhead, and Vexler looked up to see dark clouds gathering with impossible speed. Within minutes, the first drops began to fall, huge and heavy, splattering against his chitin with almost painful force. He scrambled to activate his emergency beacon, then stopped, mandibles frozen. Using the beacon meant failure, meant returning to the academy as the cadet who couldn't last even a day. Meant the shame of his entire Clutch family knowing their offspring had been too. Weak. Vexler deactivated the beacon and instead began searching for shelter, moving awkwardly through the undergrowth as the rain intensified. He found a hollow beneath an enormous tree's root system and squeezed himself inside, huddling miserably as water poured down around him. The first night was the longest of his life. Sounds moved through the darkness. Heavy footfalls and strange calls that made his survival instincts scream warnings, and the rain never stopped. A constant drumming that echoed inside his makeshift shelter until he thought he might go mad from the noise when dim light finally began filtering through the jungle canopy. Vexler emerged from his shelter exhausted and hungry. His survival pack contained nutrient bars designed for his species, but they were meant for emergencies. Enough for maybe 3 days if he rationed carefully. He needed to find water and food, preferably before whatever made those sounds in the darkness came back. Vexler had traveled maybe 200 meters when he heard voices, the translator catching fragments of Pelthian and Harvak languages. He followed the sound and found Kirasun and Torgan huddled together beneath a rocky overhang that provided minimal protection from the elements. Kirasun looked terrible, her mobility suit's water reservoir showing signs of contamination from the rain, and Torgan was shaking despite his massive size, his gray skin darker than usual, which indicated stress in his species. Vexler, Kirasun bubbled, relief evident in her voice. We thought we were alone. I landed maybe a kilometer from here, Vexler said, moving closer to his fellow cadets. This is worse than the briefing suggested. Much worse, Torgan rumbled. I cannot find anything to eat. All the plants here are toxic, according to my scanner. As if to emphasize his point, Torgan's stomach made a sound like grinding rocks, a clear sign of hunger in his herbivorous species. They spent the morning trying to find resources, but everything they encountered seemed designed to kill them. The water in a nearby stream registered as contaminated with bacteria that would be deadly to all their species. The plants were either poisonous or covered in thorns that could pierce even Torgan's thick hide. And the heat was rising to levels that made Kirasun's suit alarms start beeping warnings about water temperature. I'm calling for extraction, Kirasun announced, reaching for her emergency beacon. This is impossible. We're gonna die here. Wait, Vexler said, though he wasn't sure why he was arguing. Part of him desperately wanted to press his own beacon and end this nightmare. But another part, the part that had scored highest in his class on tactical analysis, whispered that giving up on day one was premature. Wait for what? Kirasun demanded. For the predators to find us, for the poisonous plants to kill us, for... Hey, you guys okay? All 3 cadets spun toward the voice, and Vexlar felt his mandibles drop open in shock. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of their makeshift camp, soaking wet and covered in mud, but grinning like he was having the time of his life. He carried an armful of some kind of plant material and had fashioned a rough pack from what looked like large leaves. "You look pretty rough," Jake said, his tone conversational as if they weren't stranded on a death world. "Been a tough night?" "How are you here?" Torgan asked, his deep voice confused. "We all landed in different zones. Yeah. But I heard your pod come down maybe a couple kilometers that way." Jake gestured vaguely toward the east. "Figured I'd check if anyone landed nearby. Survival's easier in groups." Vexler stared at the human, trying to reconcile the casual attitude with the situation they were in. Jake Morrison had apparently hiked several kilometers through hostile jungle terrain to find other cadets, and he looked more energized than worried. "You're not afraid?" Kirasoon asked, the question coming out more accusatory than probably intended. Jake shrugged, setting down his bundle of plant material. "Not really. I mean, this place reminds me of camping in Oregon. Less rain, though." "Less rain?" Vexler repeated, certain his translator had malfunctioned. "It rained continuously for 12 hours. Yeah, but it was a light rain," Jake said, pulling out what looked like edible tubers from his makeshift pack. "Back home in the Pacific Northwest, we get storms that last for days. This was barely a drizzle." The three alien cadets exchanged looks, trying to process what they were hearing. "Anyway, you guys need water, right?" Jake continued, pulling out a container from his survival pack. "There's a stream about 100 meters that way. The water's fine after you boil it. Or you can use those purification tablets they gave us." "The water is contaminated," Torgan protested. "My scanner showed dangerous bacteria." "Well, yeah. That's why you purify it," Jake said patiently, as if explaining something obvious to children. "Most water in nature has bacteria. You just kill it with heat or chemicals," he demonstrated, using a small fire he built with practiced ease, boiling water in his container and then adding a purification tablet for good measure. "As for food," Jake continued, holding up one of the tubers, "these are safe. Similar to potatoes on Earth. I've been eating them since yesterday and feel fine." "How do you know they're safe?" Vexler demanded, his scientific training rebelling at the idea of eating unknown alien vegetation. Jake tapped his survival pack, tested it with the emergency scanner, showed low toxicity for carbon-based life. Ate a small amount first to test, waited a few hours. No problems. He made it sound so simple, so logical. And Vexler felt a strange mixture of relief and embarrassment wash over him. They had been huddling in fear while the human had been calmly solving problems. "Look," Jake said, his tone gentler now. "I know this place seems scary, but it's really not that bad. The gravity's a bit high, but manageable. The weather's mild for a jungle environment. And the predators here are pretty small compared to what I'm used to." "Small?" Kirasoon's voice rose several octaves. "The briefing said 17 species of apex predators, right?" "But apex predator is relative," Jake explained, pulling out his datapad and showing them images. "The biggest one listed is maybe 200 kilograms. That's smaller than a black bear back on Earth, and way smaller than a grizzly." Vexler pulled up his own datapad, accessing the information about Earth that he had briefly reviewed before, and felt his chitin go cold as he read the classification. "Earth is a Class 7 death world," he said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. Jake nodded. "Yeah. So this place is honestly pretty tame by comparison. I was actually worried the exercise would be too easy." The three alien cadets stared at him, and Vexler realized with dawning comprehension that they had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. They weren't fearless. They were simply calibrated to a completely different scale of danger. Jake Morrison sat cross-legged by the fire, demonstrating how to weave plant fibers into a rope strong enough to hold weight, his hands moving with practiced ease while the three alien cadets watched with something between fascination and disbelief. "So on Earth," Jake was saying, his tone casual, like he was discussing the weather rather than survival on a death world. Humans lived as hunter-gatherers for most of our history, which meant we had to know how to find food and water in pretty much any environment. Vexler's translator struggled momentarily with the term hunter-gatherer before providing a definition that made his mandibles click in alarm. Humans had spent hundreds of thousands of years surviving without technology, without climate control, without any of the benefits of civilization. Just their wits and their bodies against nature. My dad used to take me camping every summer, Jake continued. Testing the strength of his improvised rope, we'd go to different national parks, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. No modern conveniences, just us and the wilderness. But why? Kira soon asked, her voice carrying genuine confusion. Why would you voluntarily subject yourself to danger and discomfort? Jake looked up, surprised by the question. For fun, I guess. There's something peaceful about being out in nature, away from cities and technology. Just you and the world. Torgen made a sound like a small avalanche, his species' equivalent of a nervous laugh. Your idea of fun would give most species nightmares for years. Really? Jake seemed genuinely puzzled. I mean, this place is nice. The temperature's comfortable. Plenty of water. Diverse plant life. I saw some game trails that suggest there's good hunting if we needed meat. Vexler pulled up his datapad again, scrolling through the information on Earth. The more he read, the more horrified he became. Jake, your planet has hurricanes that can level cities, earthquakes that crack the ground open, volcanoes that spew molten rock, and winter storms that can freeze a being solid in minutes. Sure, Jake agreed easily, but that's mostly in specific regions. You just avoid those areas during dangerous seasons. Or prepare properly if you can't avoid them. Your planet has predators that can weigh over 600 kilograms. Vexler continued, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. With claws longer than my leg segments and jaws strong enough to crush bone. Oh, you mean grizzly bears, Jake said, nodding. Yeah, those are dangerous if you're not careful, but they mostly want to be left alone. You make noise while hiking so they know you're coming. Store your food properly so you don't attract them. And carry bear spray just in case. Bear spray? Torgen asked. Chemical deterrent, Jake explained. Shoots a stream of capsaicin-based irritant. Stops a charging bear pretty effectively. Kira soon made her water-through pipes sound again. Your species developed chemical weapons against your own planet's predators. Not weapons exactly, Jake corrected. More like a non-lethal defense. We actually have laws protecting bears and other predators, because we recognize they're important to the ecosystem. This might have been the most incomprehensible thing Jake had said yet. Humans lived alongside creatures that could kill them easily, and instead of eliminating the threat, they protected it. Look, I know it sounds intense, Jake said, apparently noticing their reactions, but humans adapted to survive on Earth. It's made us pretty good at handling difficult environments, the high gravity, unpredictable weather, dangerous fauna. It's all stuff we evolved to deal with. He stood up, stretching his arms over his head. Which is why a place like this isn't that scary. The gravity's actually lighter than Earth standard. The predators are manageable. And the weather's been pretty calm, as if the universe wanted to contradict him. A sound like a freight transport engine echoed through the jungle, deep and reverberating in a way that made Vexler's exoskeleton vibrate. All 3 alien cadets froze, their various species' fear responses kicking in simultaneously. Vexler's chitin darkened. Kirasun's water began sloshing frantically in her suit, and Torgen's massive body went completely still in the way prey animals do when they hope a predator won't notice them. Jake cocked his head, listening. That's probably one of those apex predators from the briefing. Sounds big. We need to leave, Vexler hissed, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Now, immediately. We should activate our emergency beacons. Hold on, Jake said. his voice calm but firm. "Let's not panic." That sound came from at least a kilometer away, maybe more. Sound travels far in jungle environments. Another roar echoed, closer this time. And Vexler felt every instinct he possessed screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything except stand there like prey waiting to be devoured. Jake held up one hand. "Listen to how it's vocalizing. Those are territorial calls. It's warning other creatures to stay out of its area. That means it's not hunting. It's just defending its space." "How do you know?" Torgan managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. "Same principle as bear behavior," Jake explained. "Moving slowly to gather their supplies. Predators that hunt are quiet. They don't want to scare off prey. Loud vocalizations are usually about territory or mating." He started extinguishing the fire, covering the embers with dirt. "That said, we should probably move away from this area. No point in testing whether it considers us a threat to its territory. Finally, something sensible." Kirasun Bubble Jake led them through the jungle with confidence that Vexlar found both reassuring and terrifying. The human moved like he belonged in this environment, stepping over roots and ducking under branches with practiced ease, occasionally stopping to listen or examine the ground for tracks. "See these marks?" Jake pointed to gouges in the bark of a tree. "That's from claws. The predator marks its territory, probably patrols a circuit through this area." "And you know this how?" Vexler asked, following as quickly as his 6 legs could manage in the heavy gravity. "Grizzlies do the same thing," Jake said, continuing to walk. They'll claw trees to mark territory and leave scent markers. Once you understand the pattern, you can avoid them pretty easily. They walked for several hours, Jake stopping occasionally to show them edible plants, safe water sources, and how to read the jungle's natural signs. By the time they stopped to rest, Vexler's mind was overflowing with information that had never been covered in any academy class. "How do you know all this?" Vexler finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "You're a first-year cadet like us. How do you have survival knowledge that exceeds our military training?" Jake looked genuinely confused. "This is just basic outdoor stuff. Every human kid learns this growing up. Well, every kid whose parents take them camping anyway. Every human child." Kirasun started, then stopped, unable to complete the sentence. "I mean, not everyone camps," Jake clarified. "Plenty of humans live in cities their whole lives, but outdoor education is pretty common. Schools teach wilderness survival. Parents pass down knowledge. It's just part of our culture." Vexler tried to imagine an entire species where childhood education included learning to survive in hostile wilderness, where what they considered recreational activities would qualify as advanced military training for most coalition species. "Your planet made you into natural soldiers," Torgan said quietly. And there was something like respect in his rumbling voice. "Without even trying." Jake frowned. "I don't think of it that way. These are just life skills. Knowing how to take care of yourself in nature, how to read your environment, how to stay calm when things get dangerous." He pulled out some of the tubers he had collected, offering them to the group. "Besides, the point isn't to fight nature, it's to coexist with it. To understand that you're part of the ecosystem, not separate from it." As they ate, Vexler watched Jake stare out at the jungle canopy, his expression peaceful in a way that Vexler was beginning to understand. For humans, this wasn't a test of survival. It was a reminder of home. That realization was somehow both comforting and absolutely terrifying. Aboard the orbital station, Commander Salen stared at the monitoring screens with growing concern. 3 days into the exercise, and the statistics were worse than any previous year's cohort. 73% have activated emergency extraction, she said, her gill slits fluttering in agitation. "We've never had a failure rate this high." Lieutenant Chen, the human instructor who had joined the academy staff only 6 months ago, leaned forward to examine the data, her dark eyes scanning the information with practiced efficiency. "Which cadets are still on the surface?" "Mostly those in Jake Morrison's group," another instructor reported. A Savari named Kalith, who gestured with 2 of her 4 arms at a cluster of green dots on the tracking display. "They reached the extraction zone yesterday, but haven't called for pickup." Commander Salen felt her secondary hearts flutter nervously. "Have they activated their beacons?" "Negative," Kalith confirmed. "In fact, they appear to be moving away from the extraction zone. Their transponders show them heading toward these coordinates." The Savari highlighted a region on the map where several red dots pulsed, indicating cadets who had activated emergency beacons but were still waiting for pickup due to severe weather in their zones. "They're going after the others," Lieutenant Chen said, a slight smile crossing her features. "Jake's group is trying to help the cadets stuck in difficult areas. That's not part of the exercise protocol," Commander Salen protested, though even as she said it, she knew the objection was weak. Initiative and helping fellow soldiers were exactly the qualities the Academy tried to instill. "No," Lieutenant Chen agreed. "But it's exactly what a good soldier would do on the planet's surface." Jake was explaining his plan to 3 very skeptical alien cadets. "So we know there are at least 4 groups that called for emergency extraction but can't be picked up because of the storm systems," he said, pointing to the basic map on his datapad. "They're probably scared, maybe injured, definitely unprepared for extended stays. And you want to help them?" Vexler asked, though by now he was starting to expect this kind of thinking from the human. "Of course," Jake said simply. "We have supplies, knowledge, and we're doing fine. Seems wrong to sit in the extraction zone when others need help." Kirasum bubbled thoughtfully. "It would mean several more days in this environment. Maybe a week," Jake admitted. "But honestly, I'm kind of enjoying myself. When else am I going to get to explore an alien jungle?" "On else am I going jungle?" Torgan rumbled what might have been a laugh. Only a human would describe a survival exercise as enjoyable exploration. They reached the first group by nightfall, finding 2 Xanthari cadets huddled in what remained of their emergency shelter after a falling tree had crushed most of it. Both were injured, scared, and suffering from dehydration. Jake immediately went into what Vexler was starting to think of as human helper mode. His movements efficient and calm as he assessed injuries, provided clean water, and helped construct a proper shelter. "You're going to be okay," Jake told the injured cadets, his voice carrying an assurance that made even Vexler feel better. "The storm's clearing, extraction will be here soon. But until then, you're safe." One of the Xanthari, her chitin cracked and leaking vital fluids, clicked weakly. "How are you so calm?" "This planet is trying to kill us." "Nah," Jake said, applying a bandage from his medical kit with surprising gentleness for someone from a death world. "The planet doesn't care about us one way or another. It's just being a planet. We just need to learn how to exist in it safely." He stayed with them through the night, keeping watch while Vexler, Kirasun, and Torgan rested. When Vexler woke for his turn at watch, he found Jake teaching the injured Xanthari how to identify safe water sources by the types of plants growing nearby. The second group they found was in worse shape. A mixed squad of 4 cadets from different species who had made every possible mistake. They had drunk contaminated water, eaten toxic plants, and set up camp directly in what was clearly a game trail used by large animals. Jake didn't criticize or lecture. He simply helped, treating their illnesses with the medical supplies, moving their camp to a safer location, and teaching them the basics of wilderness survival with patient explanations that never made them feel stupid for not knowing on Earth. Jake explained while showing them how to build a proper fire. "We have a saying that there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad preparation. You guys didn't know what to prepare for, because you've never needed this knowledge before. That's not your fault. Kirasun, who had been taking notes on her datapad about everything Jake did, spoke up. Jake, you would make an excellent instructor. The human laughed. I'm just doing what my dad taught me, what his dad taught him. It's just passed down knowledge. By the 5th day, word had spread among the remaining cadets that Jake Morrison's group was moving through the jungle helping others. Several cadets who hadn't activated emergency beacons reached out via short-range communicators asking for assistance with various problems. Jake responded to every request, hiking through difficult terrain to reach isolated cadets, never showing frustration or impatience, even when the problems were simple things that a more experienced survivalist would have avoided. Vexler watched in fascination as the human transformed what could have been a disaster into a learning experience. Jake didn't just solve problems, he taught others how to solve them, creating a network of increasingly capable cadets who began helping each other. You're changing the entire dynamic of the exercise, Vexler observed one evening as they sat around a fire with 6 other cadets from various species. Am I? Jake looked genuinely surprised. I'm just helping people who need it. No, Torgan rumbled. His massive form relaxed in a way that would have been impossible on day 1. You're showing us that this environment isn't our enemy. That survival isn't about enduring until rescue comes. It's about adapting and thriving. Jake poked at the fire with a stick. Considering, I guess that's one way to look at it. My dad always said that nature isn't good or evil, it just is. And our job is to find our place in it. A Pelthian cadet named Sarkle, who they had rescued from a flooded cave system earlier that day, spoke up. But humans are from a Class 7 death world. Finding your place in nature meant constant danger. True, Jake acknowledged. But it also meant we learned to respect nature, to work with it instead of against it. Sure, Earth is dangerous, but it's also beautiful, powerful, alive in a way that makes you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. Vexler pulled up his datapad and began recording. He had been documenting everything since day 3, compiling observations about human psychology, survival techniques, and leadership qualities that he planned to submit as a formal report. Jake, Vexler said carefully, do you realize that everything you're doing, everything you're teaching us, this exceeds the standard coalition military survival training by several orders of magnitude? The human looked uncomfortable with the praise. It's really not that special. Any experienced camper could do this. Any experienced human camper, Kirasun corrected, which apparently means any human with basic outdoor education. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy considers this advanced special forces material. Jake was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. I never thought about it that way. I guess growing up on Earth gives us a different baseline for what's normal. That's exactly my point, Vexler said, his mandibles clicking with excitement. Humans don't think of themselves as exceptional because your entire species evolved to survive conditions that would kill most other intelligent life. You're not trying to be impressive. You're just being yourselves. And that might be the most terrifying thing about your species. Jake laughed. I don't know if I should be flattered or concerned. Both, Torgan suggested. Definitely both. The extraction shuttles arrived on the 7th day, descending through Cora 7's atmosphere like metal angels coming to rescue those who had survived. Jake watched them land with mixed feelings. Part of him was ready to return to the academy and a hot shower. But another part felt like they were leaving just as he was starting to really enjoy the jungle. I can't believe it's over, Kirasun said, her mobility suit cleaner now than it had been in days thanks to Jake's help finding a proper water source for flushing her systems. I actually feel like I learned something. Vexler's mandibles clicked in agreement. We all learned something, or rather, we learned many things. Most of them from watching Jake treat a Class 3 death world like an outdoor resort. Hey, "I never said it was easy," Jake protested, though he was grinning. "Just manageable with the right knowledge and attitude," Torgan rumbled as he loaded his gear onto the shuttle. The human definition of manageable needs serious recalibration for the rest of us. The ride back to the orbital station was noisy, with cadets sharing stories of their survival experiences. Those who had called for early extraction seemed embarrassed at first, but Jake made a point of talking to them, explaining that recognizing your limits was smart, not shameful. Everyone has different backgrounds and experiences. Jake told a young Savari cadet who looked miserable about having activated his beacon on day 2. "You did what you needed to do to stay safe. That takes courage too." Vexler watched the human work his way through the shuttle, offering encouragement and perspective to cadets who felt like failures, and realized that Jake's greatest skill wasn't survival knowledge. It was his ability to make others believe in themselves. The debriefing assembly was scheduled for this afternoon after everyone had time to rest and clean up. The Academy's main auditorium held all 200 cadets plus the instructor staff, and the atmosphere was tense with anticipation of what would surely be a discussion about the high failure rate. Commander Salen took the stage, her Pelthian features composed but her gill slits betraying her nervousness. "Cadets, we have completed the survival exercise evaluation, and the results are unprecedented in the Academy's history." The room went silent. 73% of you activated emergency extraction beacons, the commander continued. "This is significantly higher than any previous cohort, and it raises serious questions about our training protocols." Vexler felt his chitin darken with shame, though he hadn't activated his beacon. Many around him shifted uncomfortably, various species-specific signs of embarrassment rippling through the assembly. "However," Commander Salen said, her tone changing, "we also witnessed something remarkable. A single group not only survived the full 7 days, but actively aided 12 other cadets in distress, demonstrating leadership, initiative, and survival skills that exceeded expectations." She gestured, and the holographic display lit up with footage from the planet's surface. Vexler watched himself on screen, looking frightened and lost. Then Jake, appearing to offer help, the footage continued, showing Jake teaching them to purify water, identify safe plants, build proper shelters. It showed him treating injured cadets, moving camps to safer locations, patiently explaining wilderness concepts that seemed obvious to him but were revolutionary to everyone else. "What we're watching," Commander Salen explained, "is Cadet Jake Morrison conducting impromptu field training that rivals our advanced survival courses." More footage played, showing Jake's calm during the apex predator encounter, his strategic thinking in helping other groups, his natural teaching ability that made complex concepts accessible. Lieutenant Chun stood and addressed the assembly. "For those who don't know, I'm the Academy's human instructor, and I'd like to provide some context about what you just witnessed." She activated a new display showing Earth. Rotating slowly, Earth is classified as a Class 7 death world, which means it's one of the most hostile planets known to harbor intelligent life. Humans evolved under conditions that most species would consider apocalyptic. The display showed images of Earth's weather extremes, massive predators, natural disasters, and Vexler heard gasps and nervous sounds from cadets who hadn't known the full scope of humanity's homeworld. What Cadet Morrison demonstrated wasn't exceptional human ability, Lieutenant Chen continued. It was baseline human competence. Any human with basic outdoor education would have performed similarly. The room erupted in disbelief. Voices raised in multiple languages, and Commander Salen had to call for order. "Let me be clear," Lieutenant Chun said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Humans don't think of themselves as remarkable because their entire species shares this capability. To them, surviving on a Class 3 world is no more impressive than you would find surviving in your own homeworlds. Wilderness." She pulled up a comparison chart. The average human child by age 12 has survival knowledge equivalent to our advanced special forces training. Not because they're soldiers, but because their planet required it for their species to survive. Vexler felt his mandibles drop open. He had suspected humans were exceptional, but seeing it quantified like this was staggering. Cadet Morrison, Commander Salem called, and Jake stood from his seat, looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Please join us on stage." Jake made his way forward, and Vexler noticed he moved with the same casual confidence he had shown in the jungle. Unbothered by the hundreds of eyes watching him, "Cadet Morrison," Commander Salem said formally, "your actions during this exercise were exemplary. You not only completed the survival requirement but provided leadership and training to your fellow cadets under challenging conditions. Thank you, Commander," Jake said, "though I really was just helping out." "Just helping out," Lieutenant Chun repeated with a slight smile. "By conducting wilderness survival training, treating medical emergencies, and teaching advanced tracking and foraging techniques." Jake shrugged. "My dad would have done the same thing. It's just how humans are raised. You help people who need it." Commander Salem pulled up Vexler's report on her datapad. "According to Cadet Vexler's detailed documentation, you stated that Cora 7 reminded you of camping in Oregon. Can you elaborate on that?" "Sure," Jake said, seemingly at ease despite the formal setting. "Oregon has similar climate patterns. Dense forests, diverse wildlife, comparable terrain. Obviously different species and some variations in atmospheric composition. But the general feel was familiar. And Oregon's considered a dangerous region on Earth?" Commander Salem asked. "What?" Jake looked confused. "No, Oregon's great, popular vacation spot. Families go there for outdoor recreation all the time." The auditorium went absolutely silent as the implications sank in. Humans took their children to environments more dangerous than Class 3 death worlds for fun. Lieutenant Chun addressed the assembly again. "This exercise has revealed a significant gap in our training protocols. We've been preparing cadets for coalition standard environments, but conflicts and operations often occur in hostile territory." She gestured to Jake. "Humans bring a unique perspective and skill set to the coalition military. They're naturally adapted to extreme conditions, and more importantly, they can teach these skills to others." Commander Salem nodded. "Effective immediately, we're implementing changes to the survival training program. Human instructors will develop new protocols incorporating Earth-based wilderness techniques. And we're establishing a mentorship program, pairing human cadets with others for field exercises." Vexler felt excitement buzzing through his nervous system. This was bigger than just one exercise. This was recognizing that humans brought something genuinely new to the coalition. "Cadet Morrison," Commander Salem continued, "you've been offered an instructor assistant position for next year's survival training, pending your acceptance and continued academic success." Jake looked surprised. "I'm still a first-year cadet." "Commander, which is precisely why this is significant," Lieutenant Chen said. "You're not more experienced than other first years. You're simply human, which means your baseline knowledge exceeds our advanced training." The commander dismissed the assembly. But before Jake could leave the stage, Vexler, Kirasun, and Torgan approached. "Jake," Vexler said, his translator catching the subtle emotion in his clicks and chirps, "I want to formally request to continue training with you. I have much to learn about adapting to hostile environments." Kirasun bubbled agreement. "I feel the same. Before this exercise, I was terrified of wilderness. Now I understand it's about knowledge and preparation." Torgan rumbled. "Plus, someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally give the rest of us heart failures by calling apex predators manageable." Jake laughed. "I'd be happy to train with you guys, though I should warn you. The next exercise is on a Class 4 death world. The three alien cadets exchanged glances, and Vexler was surprised to realize he wasn't afraid. Concerned, perhaps, cautious, certainly, but not afraid. That actually sounds interesting, Vexler heard himself say. And Mantikara soon made a sound like water burbling with laughter. Listen to us. A week ago we were terrified of Class 3. Now we're considering Class 4 interesting. That's called growth, Jake said with a grin. Though I promise Class 4 will be more challenging. Might actually have to try a little. Torgen's rumbling laugh echoed through the auditorium. Only a human would need to go.